I cherish my time at Conception Seminary College from 1983 to 1985. One of the great things that we got to experience while we were in the seminary there were monthly days of recollection. These were a day each month when we would pause from classes, the normal schedule, and spend the day in silence. We would go to communal prayer and Mass, of course, and I think we would also have a talk or two from one of the monks, but we were to spend the rest of the day in silence. It was a good opportunity to learn to listen, to learn to pray, and to be together and be still. I learned in those days that the stillness is really a holy place where we can encounter God in unique ways and hear things that we won't hear otherwise. There was a certain sense of humor to those days of recollection as well, I must admit. Every time we had a day of recollection, it seemed that one of the meals was a rather loud one to eat. It seemed we always had tacos for lunch or something similar that filled the refectory with crunching sounds even though we couldn't talk. And I remember thinking, somebody in that kitchen has a sense of humor here. The beauty of that silence is a sense of asceticism, learning to deny ourselves something. It is the same sense of asceticism that we practice in other ways in our tradition, whether almsgiving or fasting, or any time we choose to give something up in order to embrace a greater good. In the first reading this morning from the prophet Ezekiel, the Lord berates Israel for not being faithful to the covenant that they had made with God. And God says, in spite of it, I will be faithful to that covenant and I'll make a new covenant with you. And your experience of my faithfulness will bring you to silence. I was struck by what God says there, that sometimes it really is our only response to what God does. We're speechless at times, or we don't know what to say. And silence is a holy and appropriate response, sometimes to the events of a day or to what God has done. Sometimes that silence is in embarrassment. Sometimes it is just in wonder and awe. But I've learned that practicing silence is a good spirit of asceticism that can prepare me for greater sacrifices. It's the same with fasting or the same with almsgiving. We practice those ascetical deeds so that we might be ready to make greater sacrifice when the time comes. We celebrate St. Maximilian Kolbe today, a priest who died in the concentration camps in World War II. When he heard of a husband and father who was to be executed, he offered his life in his place, and he was allowed to make that sacrifice. I'm sure there were lots of moments of fasting or almsgiving or choosing silence or denying himself in plenty of smaller ways that prepared Maximilian Kolbe to make this ultimate sacrifice. It is a good invitation to us not to underestimate the power of those daily ascetical choices we can make, to be generous, to be silent, to give, or just to listen in prayer. Because I've learned that's where God often has the most profound words to say to us.